Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shir. We are studying Tanya. We're holding in the middle of Perek Ches. This, I believe, is the third time we're learning third Shir in Perek Ches. And we're holding in the new Tanyas, we're holding at the top of page 132, which in the old prints is in the top of page 130. We're learning here about the difference between Klipas Noiga and Sholosh Klipas Atmeis. Klipas Noiga being the klipa that is understood sort of as some type of a hybrid, if you will. While it is generally klipa, it has some kedusha to it. It has, let's put it in the words, it has the potential at least to be elevated to kedusha relatively easily because the nature of the klipa is one which is not as restrictive. It's not as heavy. That's klipas noiga, which generally the Yiddish Yetzer Hora. I uploaded last week's Tanya Shir and called it, right, the Yiddish, the Yiddish Yetzer Hora. The Yiddish Yetzer Hora is one which comes from Klipas Noiga. So it's Klipa, it's selfish, it's self-centered, all the rest of it, but it's Klipas Noiga. Let's say it's a very refined, maybe that's a good way of saying it, it's a very refined form of Klipa. Let's leave that at that for now. As opposed to the other type of klipa, which is Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, pretty much a much heavier type of more immobile type of klipa. This is the Goyish Yetzer Hora is generally associated with Shalosh Klipas Atmeis. Shalosh Klipas Atmeis generally refers to is the source, the energy source of all those things that are forbidden according to Torah. Shasam is 365 biblical mitzvahs. Biblical negative mitzvahs, all the rabbinic prohibitions, etc. These are all spiritually associated with Sholosh Klipas Atmeis. Whereas all those things which are permissible, permissible food, permissible relationships, etc., if done l'shem shamayim, for the sake of serving Hashem, elevated to kedusha. If not, they are inherently klipas noiga. If not done l'shem shamayim, they're actually lowered temporarily to a state of Sholosh Klipas Atmeis. Everything as we learned until now. Okay. The Alter Rebbe wants in this part of Perek Ches, at least this is the simple understanding over here. The Alter Rebbe wants us not to walk away with a minimized sense of the significance of Klipas Noiga. In other words, don't think that Klipas Noiga is no big deal. A person can just do tshuva and it's elevated to kedusha, etc. So the Alter Rebbe makes the point at the end of what we learned last time that even Klipas Noiga, which can be elevated to Kedusha, even though it can be elevated to Kedusha, and even if it is, there is a reshimu, there's always an imprint, there's always residue, if you will, or some type of a mark that's left behind in the body of the person, in the soul of the person, by virtue of the fact that they were exposed to Klipas Noiga, or that they ingested Klipas Noiga. And this also needs some form of a purification. After 120, if it's for the body, it experiences something called chibut hakever. If it is for the soul, it experiences something called kaf hakela. In other words, don't think, the Alter Rebbe says, if to give maybe a really silly analogy, right? So if Klipas Noiga is like writing with a pencil, and Sholosh Klipas Atmeis is writing with a pen, right? So simple and the most basic difference is that if you write with a pencil, you can take a rubber eraser and you can erase it. And with that, if you write with a pen, you can't. Now what can you do? You can scratch out the paper, right? You can do tshuva gdola kol kach. You can scratch away at the paper. You can get a new piece of paper. You can paint over the paper. But these are out of the norm type measures. So Klipas Noiga would be, one who engages in permissible activities, not l'shem shemayim. Maybe that would be like writing with a pencil. So if you do it, if done incorrectly, you can erase it. Alter Rebbe says it's true, you can erase it. But as when you write with a pencil and erase something, there's always a reshima. There's always a mark. The paper is not as pure and as refined and as clean and as white as it was before. And so, since the Ribbono Shel Olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't allow a Jew to get away with anything less than what the Jew is fully has the potential for. So the Alter Rebbe says there's cleanup. There's still cleanup that needs to happen afterwards. It's a simple understanding. Don't minimize the significance of exposure or ingesting klipas noiga. Be this in the form of permissible food, right? Be this in the form of permissible food, consume not l'shem shemayim, or the other example that he gave is dvarim betelim beheter. A person speaks idle talk. A person speaks nonsense. So that's not forbidden words, right? Not words which are forbidden. Permissible things, politics, sports, etc. Which in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it necessarily. I shouldn't use the example of politics and sports, but the Alter Rebbe calls it dvarim betelim. In and of themselves, there's nothing wrong with them, except that under normal circumstances, it's bittul Torah. A person should be studying; it's a waste of time, which is, of course, itself a tremendous sin and perhaps the greatest of all sins. But what if a person is ignorant and they have no skills, they can't learn Torah, they have no access to knowledge, there's no ability for the person to study Torah. This would be called dvarim betelim beheter, right? Dvarim betelim, a situation where a person speaks dvarim betelim beheter. There's no technical halachic prohibition involved because they don't have the option, they don't have the resources, the tools, etc. to study Torah. Then again, this would be an example where it remains in the realm of klipas noiga, but nevertheless, the soul, in this case, there's nothing physical that the person consumed, but the soul that was exposed to this, again, would need some type of purification. In this case, the Alter Rebbe calls it kafakela. The specifics of chibur takeva and kafakela, I don't want to get into now. First of all, because it's not a happy thing to talk about, and second of all, because I don't know enough about it to explain it. So I'm going to leave it just at that. Since I mentioned a rubber eraser, I will open a bracket and share with you one of my all-time just favorite Rebbe stories. It's not directly related to what we're learning here in the Tanya, but I can't resist. And then Be'ez Hashem will continue. So the story is told over different ways. The way I heard it, and anyways, okay. The story, the way I heard it was, so in the early 60s, I believe, or the mid 60s, they started something by the Rebbe in Crown Heights called Pegisha or Shabbos Pegisha. Maybe some of you have heard it. Maybe some of you were there. Shabbos Pegisha would be what they would call in English these encounters with Chabad. And basically it was the olden day form of Mivtzoyim before they had, before it was developed like it is today, could even be before they had the formal Mivtzoyim. Anyway, I'm not sure exactly the history, but whatever the case may be, maybe some of you know Rabbi Hanoka from Pasadena. His father was very involved. It's called Pegisha or encounter with Chabad, and they would bring whoever they could. The Rebbe was sturming. The Rebbe was storming the world to bring Yidden to Yiddishkeit, to teach them. Anyways, they would bring them. And the Seder was they would come to Crown Heights for a Shabbos. They'd be Shabbos in Crown Heights. They would stay at different people's houses, and Sunday morning, especially in the early days, there was Yechidus with the Rebbe. So this particular legend, the way I heard it, was that it was a Pegisha once for college kids, university students. Again, I have no idea how many. This could have been 5, it could have been 50, And they came, they spent Crown Heights the Shabbos. These are college kids in the 60s. And they spent Shabbos in Crown Heights in different people's houses, and Sunday morning they come, maybe they were even present at a Fabringen, I'm not sure. Sunday morning they come into Yechidus by the Rebbe. And of course, they're explained that this is a significant experience. This is a big deal. Anyways, they come into the Rebbe's room, and they're standing there, and I guess there was exchange of words, or whatever the case may be. The Rebbe invited them, if they wished, to ask him any question that they liked. These are, college kids in their early 20s probably. And, American kids. Chutzafim, chutzpah, completely out of their realm of familiarity. I mean, sitting in the office of a Hasidic Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Anyways, they said, Rebbe, we have a couple questions. Go ahead, said the Rebbe. He said, look, we spent Shabbos in Crown Heights with your Hasidim. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to spend time with a Chabadnik, but within the first sentence of the second sentence, they start talking about the Rebbe. The Rebbe, the Rebbe, the Rebbe, the Rebbe, the Rebbe. The Rebbe said this, Rebbe said that, Rebbe said this, Rebbe did that, Rebbe went here, Rebbe went there, Rebbe, 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 Rebbe. So they said to the Rebbe, the Hasidim talk about you, and they say that you don't make any mistakes. The Rebbe makes no mistakes. And we're pretty intrigued by that. We'd like, Rabbi, have you any comment on this? Is it true that you don't make mistakes? And then again, the way I heard the story, one of them said to the Rebbe, we noticed that you have pencils on your desk. And if you remember in the good old days when they made pencils, the back of every pencil had a little rubber eraser. And the rubber eraser on the Rebbe's desk was used. They said, Rebbe, if these are your pencils and these are your rubber erasers, we noticed that both the pencils and the erasers are used. So could we let the Hasidim know that, you use the rubber eraser? You must have made some kind of mistake. I'm sure they'd be delighted to know that, they have a mistaken notion about you. I mean, that probably wasn't the words, but that's the idea. That's question number one. And question number two, they said, oh, by the way, they said, your Hasidim say about you that you make miracles. We'd love to know if that's true. Are you a miracle worker? American kids. And if yes, Rebbe, could you do a demo, just show us one. Anybody can say I do miracles, but we'd like to see if you can actually do one. Like that would be, we'd be more convinced if you actually displayed one. Again, probably not the words, but probably not too far off from the Teichen. So the Rebbe said the following, the way I heard. The Rebbe said, number one, I'm not responsible for what the Hasidim say about me, which doesn't confirm or deny, right? But the Rebbe said, I'm not responsible for what they say about me. That's point one. But I will answer your question, the Rebbe said. And then he said a rubber eraser serves two purposes. Number one, if something was written and it is incorrect, it is not true, it is false. The rubber eraser can be used to erase what was written there, to leave in its place, to create a vacuum so that something true can be written there. The Rebbe said there's another purpose to a rubber eraser. That is, what if something was written and it is true? It is correct. But the person who wrote it, when they reflect upon what the person who wrote it, is not stagnant. The person who wrote it writes it, and then later on, perhaps hours, weeks, days, months, minutes, seconds, reflects back on what they have written, and because the person has grown, they now see more depth than what they saw before. They themselves have developed. The rubber eraser can be used to erase something correct, to create in its place room to write something true on a higher level. And then the Rebbe said, you asked me if I can do miracles. And the Rebbe said, yes, I can. And the Rebbe said, actually, there's nothing unique about the fact that I can do miracles. Every Jew, this is the Lubavitcher Rebbe answering, right? Every Jew can do miracles. In fact, our very existence is the greatest miracle of them all. And you ask me to display one, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to attempt to perform a miracle. And you can just imagine the kids crowd around the Rebbe's desk. What's he going to do? Make the rubber eraser disappear? What's he going to do? Make his phone stand up and do the kazatska? Like, well, And the Rebbe said, the miracle I'm going to try to attempt to do right now is to impress upon every single one of you the importance to take upon yourself something additional in the realm of studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs and embracing your identity as Jews in a way which is authentic and proud. And the Rebbe said, if I can do that, if I can impress upon you to live your lives differently from here on, I assure you, the Rebbe said, that would be the greatest miracle of them all. Anyway, so that is one of my absolute favorite stories. So there you have it. Okay. I'm saying this because in my head, it's my own mashal, but in my head, the difference between klipas noiga and sholosh klipas atmeis is like a pencil and a pen, right? In other words, both can be erased, a pencil easily, a pen with great difficulty. They can both be erased, but the Alter Rebbe's point here is that even when one erases what's written, what was imprinted upon one's body or soul with klipas noiga, there's still a follow-up purification process which is necessary. Okay, having mentioned, now I'm going to learn a little bit further. Having mentioned that dvarim betelim beheter, when a person speaks idle talk in a case where it's permissible, they're not violating anything, it would need a special tikkun. The neshama needs a special tikkun of kaf hakela. Having mentioned that, the Alter Rebbe mentions sort of almost parenthetically that if the person were to speak words in a scenario where those words are forbidden, which is associated with sholosh klipas atmeis, then once again they would need an additional, in line with what we're saying over here, that the difference in klipas noiga and sholosh klipas atmeis is the extent to which the purification process is necessary. So Alter Rebbe will contrast for permissible words with forbidden. Permissible words, dvarim betelim beheter. So the person needs, the Alter Rebbe said, the person needs, the soul needs purification through kaf hakela. Diburim asurim, we learned last time, needs Burim asurim also kaf hakela. In addition to kaf hakela, also tzricha leir the Gehenna. Okay, the neshama needs purification again. V'chein mi, top of page 132 or page 130. V'chein mi she'ef shalei lasek b'Torah. Not just forbidden words, not just words which are forbidden because it's leitzonos, lashon hora, right? Things of that nature, chas v'shalom. But even if it's dvarim betelim, idle talk, simple, meaningless, nonsense talk, right? Not hurting anybody, not gossiping, not nothing like that. But in a scenario where a person does have the opportunity, skills, ability to study Torah, so now the idle words become forbidden words, not because of what their content is, but because of what their content is not. They should have been studying Torah. So again, we're associated now with sholosh klipas atmeis. Again, ein kaf hakela levadim moile nafshi lemerkel azach. It's not sufficient just kaf hakela, the purification process for the neshama for klipas noiga. That would not be sufficient. Rak oinshim chamurim, bitter penalties shemanishim al bitul Torah befotus, that the soul receives for bitul Torah. Milvad oinash hakloli lechol bitul mitzvah seiser machmas atzlus begehenim shel shelek mavur b'makam acher. The neglect to fulfill any positive mitzvah, right? Neglect to fulfill any positive mitzvah, in general, requires this purification process. In addition, you have specifically bittul Torah, neglecting the study of Torah, which is worse than the regular neglect of fulfilling any positive mitzvahs. So for this, the neshama needs all types of purification processes. After 120, the Alter Rebbe here refers to Gehenim shel sheleg, a Gehenim of snow, etc. And similar. What's a Gehenim of snow? Obviously, not actual literal snow. I'm not sure to be honest, not sure the exact significance of a Gehenim of snow. A person who involves themselves in studying worldly wisdoms, as written in the laws of Talmud Torah, even though in this case it's not dvarim betelim, it's not idle, it's not meaningless, there's wisdom here, but nevertheless it is not Torah wisdom. And if the person finds himself in a situation where they should be studying Torah, and they have, as we'll learn soon, they have actually no need. There's no specific need for studying these worldly wisdoms. There's no need for it. So then the study of it is considered bittul Torah. You should be studying bittul Torah. You should be studying Torah. So again, this would be considered dvarim betelim and would fall under the same category. Of what we learned before of dvarim betelim. Alter Rebbe adds inherently, really the last point of the parak. In a way, studying secular wisdom Again, when not necessary, when not doing so for the sake of serving Hashem, just for the sake of pursuing the wisdoms of the world, in a sense, that's worse than Dvarim B'Teilim. In a sense, that's Yiseiru Tumasa, Shel Chachma Yisumas Al Tumas Dvarim B'Teilim. That's worse in a sense than just regular Dvarim B'Teilim, just regular idle talk. She'eina mal b'shumatame rak hamida is misoid ruach hakodesh benafshei lakis. Because when you just talk nonsense, when it's just idle talk, the idle talk doesn't defile, it's not metame, the intellect of the nefesh ulakis, because there's no intellect involved at all. Tumas klipas noiga shebedvarim b'teilim, permissible dvarim b'teilim, is associated with klipas noiga. It doesn't defile the intellectual elements of the neshama. It doesn't touch the with the wisdom of his neshama, because there's no wisdom here. Because it's empty talk. It's idle talk. Even shoitim, even fools and ignorant people can have these kinds of conversations. On the other hand, when a person studies wisdom, secular wisdom, and again in a scenario where they have no use halachically, or from a Torah as a yid, there's no need for them to engage in this type of study. They're just doing so, let's say, out of curiosity. So in other words, it's not something that is openly, that is clearly serving Hashem. He encloses in this study the Chabad, the actual intellectual faculties of his soul. But Tumas klipas noiga shebechachma seilu, in the klipas noiga of this chachma is shnaf l'sham b'shuris hakelim b'chansanam chashul chachma kiduli dechein. So in that sense, he's investing the chachma, he's investing the wisdom of his soul in the study. So in this case, the klipas noiga, which again, klipas noiga is the lighter form of klipa, but klipa nevertheless, the klipas noiga will reach, will climb into the Chabad, into the Chochma Bina and Das of his nefesh elokis, and again, albeit with Klipas Noiga will be metame the Chabad, the Chochma Bina Das of his nefesh, in that sense even worse than idle talk. Okay, this is what's written over here. I want to again in my way, I want to illustrate this with a story. This is a story, if I remember correctly, that we heard when we studied this part of Tanya to display the point. So I forget the names of the Hasidim, but the story basically is like this. So there were Hasidim who came, who moved to Eretz Yisrael, even in some cases even before what we call today the former founding of the state of Israel. Some before, some a little after. Basically because the Hasidim came. Many of them came right out of Russia after the Second World War, right? Some of them came in 46, 47, so some of them came to Eretz Yisrael. So in those days, those of you who know history, maybe some of you remember, the economy in Eretz Yisrael was very difficult, was great struggle, and the poverty situation was rampant. I mean, that's what happened. Now, these were some Chassidim who came to a fledgling, from an economic perspective, not from a spiritual perspective, but from an economic, political perspective, a fledgling country, and they were, struggling to get their act together. So these were Chassidim who came. They were tremendous people. Chassidim of the Hashem. They needed jobs, they needed money, they needed to survive, and they came to a place where there wasn't much infrastructure. So this is not talked about enough, but many of them had no choice and had to engage in very physically taxing labor, and in some cases very physically humiliating labor. I mean, we're talking about laying bricks, mixing cement, construction. Like these were, and it wasn't out of spite, chas v'sholom. This was the only way you could survive. So they did, and there was one particular, I wish I remembered his name. The one chassid in particular, he was a bricklayer, or a cement mixer, or something like that. And he was a yid with a long white beard. whatever it was, in the 60s, in the 70s, and he would come to work every day in overalls, and he would work all day. I don't know how physically powerful he was, I don't know, but he was loyal, and he was every manager's ideal employee, because he showed up on time every day, and he was reliable, and he worked and did everything he was supposed to. Anyways, the manager, who was probably half his age and, half his intelligence and, half his life experience, and the manager, after a while, takes a look like, this guy's really incredible. The manager, the overseer feels really bad, but what's he going to do? Give the chassid some other work? I mean, you can't. And so it is. He would work every day. Anyways, slowly with time, these companies, these businesses, they started to develop, more projects, and money started to come in, Baruch Hashem, and things started to develop. So the story is that the manager calls in this chassid one day, who's been, laying bricks or mixing cement for months, for whatever it was, a couple of years even. And he sits him down and he says, listen, I have really good news for you. What is it? He says, I have opportunity for you to work in a manager position, still under me, but you'll basically, there's, again, everything is up and coming. You'll be able to manage other workers, and instead of sitting there, I'm saying a developed human being, instead of laying bricks and mixing cement, basically you'll oversee the projects. You know already what to do. I mean, because you've been doing this for a couple of years, and you understand exactly how this business and how it works, and you'll get paid more. And the guy says, it's been bothering me to watch you like this for so long. I'm very happy to offer this for you. And you start Vimazok to tomorrow morning. And the chassid said, no thanks. And the guy was floored. He said, what? The chassid said, no, I don't want it. The guy said, maybe you don't understand what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, you'll have to work less. Even the work that you're doing will be much more mechubadik. It will be much more of an honorable type of work. You'll get paid more. You'll be more valuable to the company than you were until now, and we're ready to start tomorrow. There's no strings attached, I promise you. And the chassid said no. He said, "You want to be a bricklayer, a cement mixer? Yeah, I want." He said, "Can I ask you why? Why would you choose that willingly?" Chassid, he answered in Yiddish. But I'll say it in Yiddish, and I'll try to translate it into English. He points to the office where he'd be working, either next to the manager or something like that. He says, "Dorten ken men ken perek Tanya nit trachten." He says, if I'm going to sit in that office, I'm not going to be able to think Tanya. That was his answer. Meaning, if I have to work with my hands, I have to lay bricks and mix cement. Yes, it's a difficult labor. It's taxing labor. There's a lot of work involved. But my mind is my own. My mind is free. I control what I think about. I can lay bricks while I'm thinking Tanya. He said, you're going to put me behind the desk. I won't have to work with my hands. You're going to make me manage people. Yes, true, I'll have to sit here less often, but now I have to take on all of now I'll be working with my head. Said the chassid, the head I want for Tanya. The head I want for Chassidus. The head I want for Hashem. No, thank you. It's a similar point that the Alter Rebbe is making over here. He's contrasting Dvorim B'Telin, right? Two types of Klipas Noiga. Two types of Klipas Noiga means a person who engages in something which is not necessarily technically halachically forbidden, were it not for the fact, other than the fact that it's not directly and explicitly serving Hashem. Okay. One is idle talk, nonsense, just talking stupidity in a scenario where a person doesn't have the ability to study Torah. Okay. Or even if they do have the ability to study Torah, fine. So it's Dvarim B'Telem, it's forbidden Dvarim B'Telem. That's not the point. The point is, he's contrasting Dvarim B'Telem, whether it's Beheter or Be'isser, as opposed to engaging in Chochmas Umes, as opposed to engaging in the wisdom, secular wisdom of the world, once again, in a scenario where it's not necessary for the Jew to do so to serve Hashem. And if he could be studying Torah, then it's forbidden because he could be studying. And Alter Rebbe is saying, it's not the same. It's not the same. You should be, in both cases, what's the same is that you should be studying Torah, granted. What are you doing instead? In one case, a person is dvarim b'teilem, nonsense, just talking nonsense, wasting time, granted. In the other case, a person is engaged with their mind, using their mind to pursue secular wisdom, once again, for which, as far as living as a Yid is concerned, there's no use. Now you look at it superficially and you go, well, when he's pursuing secular wisdom, at least he's using his time productively. At least he's accomplishing something with his time, not sitting around and doing nothing. Oh no, says the Alter Rebbe, that would be a terribly bitter mistake. The tachlis of a Yid, the purpose of a Jew, is to serve Hashem. Everything that a person does in their life should either be that explicitly, or should be something that feeds into that. And if it isn't, if you're engaging in something which isn't serving Hashem or helping you to serve Hashem, and you could be, and you're in a scenario where you could be doing something more in line, more integrated with a person's purpose in this world, that's klipa. If you're engaged in klipa, you'd be better off talking nonsense rather than using your head. Why? Because if you're using your head, now you're exposing your head to the klipa. Now the klipa is going to defile, is going to climb into the way you think. Better sit there and talk nonsense. Rather than it's like this chassid said, if I have to do a type of work where for whatever reason it's been decreed upon me that I can't do a type of, I have to support my family. It's a mitzvah, obviously, but I can't do it in a way which is in a direct way associated with serving Hashem in some form. Okay, I have to work in construction. I'll do so with the greatest of pleasure. But if it's okay with you, I'd rather keep my head for myself. Alter was saying, if a Jew could study Torah, supposed to study Torah, and they're not, at least talk nonsense. Rather than investing your head in something where you shouldn't be. I'll give you another shtickle example for this. It's like imagine you say to an individual, you should be doing X, Y, Z, right? You should be doing X, Y, Z. What should you be doing? Whatever. You should show up to shul on time, right? You should show up to shul on time. Difficult for many people, many Jews, difficult to show up to shul for whatever reason, right? Some of us struggle with time management. It's all fine. Difficult to show up, right? If davening starts at whatever it is time, for some people find it difficult. Say to a guy, listen, you should show up to shul on time. And the guy goes, I can't. Why not? Listen, I have to help my family. I have to make breakfast. I have to mow the lawn. I have to check my mail. I have to check my email. I have to dos. I have to yents. A list of 1,000 excuses. You really think mowing the lawn is more important than coming to shul on time? Yes, because you have to be a mensch and you have to be a good neighbor and my neighbors are going to get upset and that's going to make a chilul Hashem and I'm being a little dramatic. But at some point you turn to the person and say, listen to me. Listen to me. You come late to shul. It's not okay. But as they say in Yiddish, Dreinish kin kop mit dein Tirutzen. Don't justify it. Stand there and say I'm wrong. What's the problem? I'm lazy. Does it excuse it? No, it doesn't. But at least you're not raiding zachain. You're not convincing yourself of all sorts of bobamaises that you're doing it l'shem shemayim, and you have to mow your lawn so you won't make a chilul Hashem in front of your neighbors, and now you blame your family, right? And what kind of a father would I be if I left it without? It's all shtusim. You need to do stuff for your family. Wake up 5 minutes earlier, 10 minutes earlier. You do what you need to do and go to shul. You're coming anyways. He's just coming 5 or 10 minutes. In other words, don't justify it. Once you start justifying it, you start believing yourself. You start actually convincing yourself. What was it? One of the Rabbeim said. One of the Rebbes said. He said, when you lie to yourself, everybody else knows that you're lying to yourself. The only one who believes you is you yourself. He said in Yiddish. He says, "Is a kunz op nar and anar? Is it some great chachma to fool a fool? You're not fooling anybody else. You're just fooling yourself. A kunz to fool a fool. In other words, don't convince yourself that this is some type of noble pursuit when all it is a waste of time or time mismanagement. Call it what it is. Time mismanagement. Time mismanagement. At least if you're aware, if you have healthy self-awareness, you'll know what it is. So inherently, the Alter Rebbe was arguing a similar kind of thing over here. The Alter Rebbe was saying like this: you're supposed to be studying Torah. Instead, you're not. You have no need to be doing anything else. Again, in a scenario where it's not bittul Torah to work, it's not bittul Torah to sleep, it's not bittul Torah to spend time with one's family, it's not bittul Torah to do all the things that a responsible, healthy human being does. Everything. It's not bittul Torah to exercise, it's not bittul Torah to take a walk, it's not even bittul Torah to relax. It's not. It's things that a healthy human being does. In a scenario where you're supposed to be studying Torah, right? And you're not, because for whatever reason, the Yetzer Hara is getting the better of you. What are you going to do? You're going to sit down and study some wisdom of the world, right? Some wisdom of the world, and justify it to yourself and say, look at this. I'm educating myself in how hurricanes work. Alter Rebbe says, stop allowing the klippa to get into your head. Now all of a sudden you feel educated and you feel, look at me, I'm so smart, and you justify it to yourself. And in the meanwhile, you're using the chabad, the chachma bina das of your brain to be used in chachmas omes, which for a Jew has no place. Maybe some of you here, or some people watching, maybe you have employees, right? If an employee is wasting time, they're on your clock, they're on your dime, you're paying for them, and they're wasting time. What would you rather? That the employee do nothing, or that the employee study something else? Sometimes an employer says, you know what, do me a favor, if you're going to waste time on my dime, do me a favor, do nothing. Why? You start pursuing other pursuits, all of a sudden, first of all, you're convincing yourself that you don't realize that you're wasting time. Second of all, you'll be distracted for longer because it's actually interesting. And most importantly, your head is in the wrong place. Now you're truly distracted. You're not just technically distracted, you're actually distracted. And so for this reason, the Alter Rebbe says the tumah, the impurity, even if it's klipas noiga, which means in a scenario where a person cannot study Torah, this is all they have. This is all they can do. Even if it's klipas noiga, the tumah by chochmas umes goes deep, by worldly wisdom goes deeper than the tumah of dvarim b'teil. Okay. Elohim kein oisam kardum lachtach bohen dehainu kedei lispanis b'revach la'avoid Hashem la'avoid avai, unless, obviously, it goes without, doesn't go without saying, because Alter Rebbe says it, but he clarifies, unless the pursuit of the sake of this wisdom unless the pursuit of the wisdom is for the sake of serving Hashem. How? For example, the person needs it for parnosa, right? Where the purpose of parnosa is lispanis b'revach, to make a parnosa in abundance, to be able to serve Hashem. So yes, of course, then obviously you would, from a Torah, from living as a Yid, from our divine mandate, one would study this wisdom in order to be able to get parnasa. Or you can actually use the wisdom itself for Hashem, for His Torah in some type of way. Like the Rambam, Maimonides, the Ramban, Nachmanides, right? As is well known, they were doctors, They were philosophers. They studied all these things. Why? So the medicine that they studied, they used for parnosa. The other philosophies that they studied, they used maybe also for parnosa, and they used, in other words, they elevated it in a spiritual sense into serving Hashem. The Siyait and their colleagues, Shoskaban, who involved themselves in these types of wisdoms for the sake of serving Hashem. So if it's serving the Eibishter, then of course it's Kedusha. If it's not serving the Eibishter, so it's Dvarim B'Teilim. Either Dvarim B'Teilim Beheter, if the person doesn't have the ability to study Torah, or Dvarim B'Teilim B'Isr if they could. Either way, the Alter Rebbe says the Chochmah, the divine, investing one's mind in it, would be worse than if it's just empty idle talk. The wisdom here, I would say the takeaway from this is the takeaway is like this. Sometimes in life we all have moments of weakness, right? Everybody has moments of weakness, moments where we're not on our game. We're not this type of spouse we should be. We're not the type of parents we should be. We're not the type of children we should be. We're not the type of rabbanim we should be. We all have moments where we struggle. That's not okay, right? But there's something much worse. Listen to what I'm about to say. There's something much worse that climbs in over there, that where the Yetzer Hara really, so to speak, turns the knife. You know what it is? What we start doing, again, in moments of weakness, is instead of acknowledging that we going through a moment of weakness, we justify it in our own minds, and we convince ourselves, we promote this, we convince ourselves that this is in fact something noble. And that's where we become very dangerous. Because now, in the words of the Tanya here, now we've allowed the tumah, we've allowed the impurity, we've allowed it to go through into the Chabad, we've allowed it to go through, to filter into the way we think. And that's not okay. In other words, as long as we have a working compass, as long as the Chabad, as long as the mind, as long as the sense of direction is clear, we know what we're supposed to do. We know, a chassid in a moment of honesty, a yid in a moment of honesty is supposed to say, I know the truth, and I don't ever forget the truth. It's nothing to do, I have moments of weakness. Say that I struggle. Struggle is struggle. Everybody's in trying to tell you, I have a Yetzer Hara. Say that I have a Yetzer Hara, so it's a me issue. I have a Yetzer Hara, but I'm not going to let the Yetzer Hara make me lose my compass. I'm not going to let the Yetzer Hara go. No. Actually, what I'm doing is justified. What I'm doing is the right thing. What I'm, those people who they make a whole philosophy, they make a whole Torah of that out of their own weaknesses. No, chas v'shalom. The Rebbe said once to somebody in Yechidus, in private audience, the Rebbe said to them, they asked the Rebbe if a certain thing is halachically permissible. If something is halachically permissible. And the Rebbe said to them, according to Torah, it's not permissible. He didn't want to answer if it's halachically permissible or not. Al pi Torah, it's not permissible. What does it mean? In other words, don't lose your sense of direction over here. This is not where we belong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This is not correct. Now again, I will need to work on myself. I will need to say a kapitel tehillim. I'll have to fabreng and daven and write to the Rebbe and sing nigunim and say l'chaim and turn my kishkes over till I can inculcate this within myself. And even then, and maybe this is something, may Hashem protect us, that I will struggle with for the rest of my life. That's okay, as long as the Jew doesn't get lost. Don't lose your sense of direction. Don't start to justify it and say, well, this was the right thing to do. No. Have the moral courage, have the intellectual clarity, have the integrity to stand up and say, you know something, I shouldn't be doing this, or I should be doing something else, or whatever the case may be. Don't let it affect the Chabad. Always preserve the Chabad. It's like if a person is Rahman al-Islam in a body of water, right? As long as you can keep your head above the water, you're okay. In other words, as long as you can see, you can breathe, you're fine. The rest of your body may be in trouble, but the head, the sense of clarity, the vision, the perspective, don't ever lose the perspective. Sometimes in life, may Hashem protect us, people become despondent. They're like, they start to give up. That's when it becomes very dangerous. Anyways, may Hashem bless us all and protect us all, and bless all the Yidden all around the world with safety and with health, and the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael and the Yidden in Chutz La'aretz. All Yidden seien gesund. B'nai Mar Amen.